Welcome back to the deep dive. Let's think for a second about what truly moves you, what gets you genuinely engaged in something. Is it always about the carrot, the promise of a reward?
Or is it maybe something deeper, something
Mhm.
internal that really powers things?
Exactly. We often talk about motivation like it's just about quantity more reward equals more action. But, well, what if the kind of motivation, the quality of that energy is actually way more important?
That distinction, that's really the heart of self-determination theory, or
Mhm.
SDT. It's a major psychological framework looking at motivation, yes, but also development and wellness, developed by Edward Dacey and Richard Ryan.
Right, and their work spans decades, doesn't it? It's not just armchair theorizing.
Oh, not at all. It's highly empirical.
Yeah.
They use really specific hypotheses, operational definitions.
Yeah.
It's grounded in research,
Yeah.
and it has a global reach now. Big communities in Europe, Ghent, Leuven, the UK, all building on this.
Yeah. And I think what's really compelling about SDT is that it's critical. It doesn't just describe us. It asks whether our environments, our jobs, schools, even governments are actually helping us thrive or, maybe holding us back.
Precisely. It takes a stand, essentially. SDT isn't relativistic. It argues there are some fundamental universal requirements for humans to function well. It hits bedrock, so to speak.
Okay, so our mission today for you listening is to really unpack those universal needs that SDT says fuel us. And then let's get into that crucial difference between, say, high quality and low quality motivation. So where do we start? The bedrock.
The bedrock, yeah, let's start there. SDT calls this basic psychological needs theory, or BPNT. The core idea is that these psychological needs function like essential nutrients for our minds.
Like vitamins for the Frankie?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
They define needs functionally. So if you're deprived of them, or if they're frustrated, it leads to negative outcomes, ill-being, burnout, feeling stuck. But if they're satisfied,
And you get growth, right? Thriving.
exactly. Psychological growth, integrity, feeling alive and well. They're seen as objective requirements, not just preferences.
Okay, so these aren't just nice to haves. They're fundamental, like oxygen for our psychological health. So
Yeah.
what's the first one? What's that first essential nutrient?
The first one is autonomy. And this one gets misunderstood a lot.
Sure.
It's not about being independent or rebellious.
Okay.
It's defined specifically as the experience of volition, of willingness. It's that feeling that you're acting in line with your own self, that you endorse what you're doing, you feel like the origin of your actions.
So it's about feeling like you have a choice, a sense of self-direction, even if you're following rules or advice.
Precisely. It's that internal endorsement that's key. And SDT argues this is crucial for stable, integrated development.
That makes a lot of sense. Feeling forced, even if you comply, just doesn't feel the same. Okay, what's nutrient number 2? This one feels related to achievement, maybe.
That would be competence. Yeah, it's related to achievement, but it's deeper. Competence is this inherent, almost biological tendency we have to use and expand our skills and abilities.
Like wanting to get better at things.
Exactly. It goes back to Robert White's idea of affectance motivation. It's that fundamental human drive to feel effective, to feel mastery, to successfully interact with the world around you.
So it's less about the grade or the promotion and more about that feeling of, I can do this, I'm capable.
That's a great way to put it. It's the feeling of efficacy itself. And the third need, that brings in the social dimension.
Relatedness.
Relatedness, yes, also absolutely fundamental. It's the basic need to feel connected to others, to feel like you belong, that you matter to people, that you're respected and cared for. It's about seeking secure connections and avoiding feeling rejected or alone.
So autonomy, competence, relatedness. And SDT says all three are essential, not just one or two.
All three, yes. The hypothesis, which tons of research now supports, is that they each contribute independently to our well-being, both long-term and even day-to-day.
I remember reading about those daily diary studies. Like, on days when people feel more autonomous, competent, and related, they actually report being happier and healthier that day.
That's right. It shows how sensitive our well-being is to the immediate satisfaction of these needs. It's not a trade-off situation. You can't just max out on competence but feel totally isolated or controlled and expect to be truly flourishing. It doesn't work that way.
Okay, so that's the foundation. These three universal needs are the psychological nutrients we all require. Now, let's talk about the energy itself, the motivation. You mentioned SDT diverges quite a bit from older theories here.
Big time. Traditional theories, like drive theory or Yerkes-Dodson, they mostly focus on the amount or strength of motivation. How motivated are you? SDT says, wait a minute, the type or quality of motivation is actually more important.
So it's not just about having more motivation, but having the right kind.
Exactly. And this differentiation happens mainly through what's called organismic integration theory, or OIT. OIT basically maps out different types of motivation along a spectrum, a continuum from controlled to autonomous.
Okay, let's walk through that continuum. The most autonomous end, that's the easy one, right? Intrinsic motivation.
Right, that's the gold standard autonomy. You do something purely for the inherent satisfaction, the interest, the fun, the challenge itself. Think about kids playing or getting lost in a hobby. That's intrinsic motivation. It's behavior driven from within.
Doing it just because you love doing it. Simple enough. But most of life isn't like that, is it? A lot of things we do are for external reasons.
That's the reality. Most of what we do, especially as adults, is extrinsically motivated. We do it to get some outcome that's separate from the activity itself, a paycheck, a grade, avoiding punishment.
So is all extrinsic motivation sort of bad? Less
Yeah.
good?
Well, that's the power of OIT. It shows that extrinsic motivation isn't just one big category of controlled motivation. It exists on a gradient. The key is the degree to which you've internalized the reason for doing it.
Internalized. Meaning how much you've taken it in and made it your own?
Exactly. How much you've accepted and integrated the value or regulation behind the action. So let's start at the far controlled end of extrinsic motivation.
Okay. Lowest level of internalization.
That's external regulation. Here, your behavior is completely dependent on outside rewards or punishments. You only do it because someone is making you, or because you'll get something tangible, or avoid something negative.
Like the kid cleaning their room only for the allowance. Or maybe speeding only when there isn't a police car around.
Perfect examples. The control is entirely external. Remove the contingency, and the behavior likely stops.
Okay, now moving inward slightly. What's the next step on that gradient? This one sounds like it causes a lot of internal friction for people.
It really does. This is introjected regulation. Here, you've sort of swallowed the rule or expectation whole, but you haven't fully digested it, haven't made it your own.
Swallowed but not digested. How does that feel?
It feels like internal pressure.
And-
The external control is now inside your head, pushing you. You feel like you should or must do something, often to avoid feeling guilty, anxious, or ashamed, or maybe to feel pride, but a fragile kind of pride.
Okay. So if I drag myself to the gym because I feel guilty if I don't, or because I think good people exercise even if I hate it, that's interjection.
That's a classic example. You're doing it to manage internal pressures, to boost or maintain self-esteem, but not because you value the activity itself. Ego involvement, where your self-worth is riding on performance, is often driven by interjection.
And that internal pressure, it doesn't lead to good outcomes, does it? Even though it feels like self-control, it's still controlling.
Right. It's internally controlling, not internally autonomous. And research shows introjection is linked to things like anxiety, inconsistent effort, and it can actually undermine deeper learning and well-being.
Okay, so that's the shoulds and musts. How do we get beyond that? How do we make extrinsic motivation feel more, well, more genuinely us?
We move further along the continuum towards autonomy. The next step is identified regulation.
Identified.
Here, you consciously recognize and accept the value of the behavior. You see it as personally important, even if the activity itself isn't inherently enjoyable. You identify with why it needs to be done.
So like paying taxes, nobody enjoys sending out the forms, probably. But I might identify with the importance of contributing to society or being a responsible citizen.
Exactly. You've accepted the value behind it. You're doing it because you believe it's important, not just because of external pressure or internal guilt. That's a big psychological step towards autonomy.
Yeah, it shifts from I have to or I should to something more like I choose to because this matters to me.
You got it. And then, the most autonomous form of extrinsic motivation is integrated regulation.
Integrated, so even more internalized than identified.
Yes. This is when the identified value isn't just accepted, it's fully assimilated into your sense of self. It fits coherently with your other values and needs. It feels completely authentic and self-endorsed.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about someone who chooses a demanding career, say, in medicine. It involves lots of extrinsically motivated tasks, paperwork, long hours. But if they fully integrated the value of helping others and the identity being a healer, those tasks become part of a larger, self-determined whole. It's who they are.
So integrated motivation is when the external goal aligns perfectly with your core self. It
Yeah.
feels almost intrinsic, even if it started externally.
Very much so. It's the endpoint of the internalization process for extrinsic motivation. And just to be clear, all of these from external right through to intrinsic are types of motivated behavior. They're intentional. They stand in contrast to a motivation.
Right, a motivation is just not being motivated at all.
Pretty much. It's a state of lacking intention, feeling helpless, like you have no control or competence, so why even bother trying? It's a lack of motivation altogether.
Okay, that continuum is really helpful for understanding the different flavors of motivation. Now, let's pivot slightly. What happens when the outside world interferes with this? Like when rewards or rules come into play? This brings us to another mini theory within SDT, right?
Yes, cognitive evaluation theory, or CET. CET specifically looks at how social and environmental factors influence intrinsic motivation. It focuses on the functional significance of events. What does an event, like getting a reward or feedback, mean psychologically to the person?
And this is where we get that really famous, maybe counterintuitive finding, the reward paradox.
The reward paradox, exactly. Basic behaviorism says rewards reinforce behavior, make it more likely. SDT research, starting way back with Desi's early studies, found that contingent tangible rewards given specifically for doing or completing a task often undermine intrinsic motivation for interesting activities.
That just seems to fly in the face of, well, common sense and a lot of management practice. Why would getting a reward make you less interested?
It comes down to how the reward changes your perception of why you're doing the activity. It shifts what SDT calls the perceived locus of causality, or PLOC.
Okay, PLOC, perceived locus of causality. Break that down for us.
So your PLOC is basically your sense of where the cause of your behavior lies. Is it inside you or outside you? An internal PLOC, IPLOC, means you feel like you're doing it because you want to, because it's interesting or aligns with your values. An external PLOC, EPLOC, means you feel like you're doing it because of some outside force, the reward, the deadline, the punishment.
Got it. Internal cause, external cause.
Right. And what happens with expected tangible rewards is that they tend to shift your PLOC from internal to external. Suddenly, your brain interprets the activity as something you're doing for the reward, not for its own sake. The reward becomes the perceived cause.
So the external reason kind of crowds out the internal one and makes play feel like work.
That's a good way to think about it. And the research found this effect was pretty specific, didn't it?
Yeah, I recall the sources mentioning that it wasn't just any reward, it was contingent rewards.
Yes, very specific. Rewards given just for showing up didn't necessarily undermine intrinsic motivation, nor did unexpected rewards after the fact. But rewards that were contingent on engaging in the task or completing it or reaching a certain standard, those were the ones consistently found to decrease later interest and persistence when the reward was removed.
Even getting paid just for spending time on something interesting could make you less interested later.
The study showed exactly that for engagement contingent and completion contingent rewards. It suggests that making the activity instrumental to getting the reward is what does the damage to intrinsic interest.
And there's even brain evidence for this now, right? It's not just surveys or observed behavior.
That's right. Some fascinating neuroimaging studies. They had people do an interesting task. Some expected and got rewards tied to success, others didn't. Later, when the rewards were removed for the first group, researchers saw decreased activity in brain regions associated with reward processing and positive affect, like the anterior striatum and midbrain, compared to the group who never got rewards.
Whoa. So the brain itself adapted to the external reward. It learned to find less value in the task's success itself once the external motivator was gone.
It suggests exactly that. The external reward didn't just add motivation. It seemed to fundamentally change the intrinsic value proposition of succeeding at the task, at least in terms of neural response. The internal kick from doing well was diminished.
That is really powerful. Okay, so external controls, especially contingent rewards, can be risky for intrinsic motivation. Before we look at applying this more broadly, there's one crucial distinction SDT makes that we need to nail down. Autonomy isn't the same thing as independence.
Yes, this is so important and a common point of confusion. Autonomy means volition, self-endorsement, feeling like you're the source of your actions. Independence means not relying on others, being separate. They're different concepts.
So you can be autonomous while still being connected or even dependent in some ways.
Absolutely. You can autonomously choose to follow wise advice. You can volitionally embrace your duties to your family or community. That's acting with autonomy, even though you're clearly interconnected, not independent.
I see. So a teenager who willingly takes on family responsibilities because they value contributing is acting autonomously, even though they're dependent on their family.
Exactly. And conversely, the idea that adolescents must emotionally detach from parents to become autonomous, SDT research suggests that's often wrong.
How so?
Well, strong, secure attachments with parents actually provide the relatedness and security that supports the development of autonomy.
Hmm.
Kids who feel connected and supported are often better able to explore, reflect, and make authentic choices. Forced attachment or rebellion driven by frustration might look like independence, but it often hinders true autonomous development.
That's fascinating. Secure connection fuels authentic choice. Okay, let's take these ideas now and look at how they play out in some bigger contexts. Parenting seems like a natural place to start.
Parenting is a prime example of a social context shaping development. Think about something called positive conditional regard, or PPCR. This is when parents give more attention, affection, or approval, specifically when a child meets expectations, like getting good grades.
That sounds like positive reinforcement, like what parents are often told to do.
It does sound like it, but SDT research suggests it functions more like a subtle form of control. The affection is conditional on the behavior.
And what kind of motivation does that tend to foster in the child?
It tends to promote introjected regulation. The child learns to act primarily to gain that conditional approval or avoid disapproval. So they might study hard, but the motivation is driven by pressure, guilt, or the need to secure parental regard rather than genuine interest, intrinsic, or personally valuing the learning identified.
So even positive conditionality can lead to that less autonomous, more pressured kind of motivation. And sometimes this controlling style, it's not necessarily malicious on the parent's part.
Often not at all. Research suggests controlling parenting practices can sometimes stem from the parent's own anxieties or insecurities, maybe separation anxiety, or their own perfectionistic tendencies.
Ah, so the parent's need for control is driving behaviors that...
Paradoxically, undermine the child's development of the very autonomous self-regulation needed for long-term success and well-being. It's a tough cycle.
Now, SDT makes a bold claim about universality. There's criticism sometimes that this focus on autonomy is just a Western individualistic value. How does SDT address that?
Yeah, that criticism comes up a lot. But SDT is very clear. Autonomy, as volition-feeling choice, and self-endorsement is considered a universal need, essential for well-being across cultures. It's not about prioritizing the self over the group.
So how does that play out in more collectivist cultures?
Well, research supports it. For instance, studies with Chinese students found that having choices made for them by parents or teachers undermined their intrinsic motivation, but only if they didn't feel close or connected to those adults.
Ah, so if the relatedness need was met, if they felt understood and cared for by the person making the choice.
Then they were more likely to willingly or autonomously accept the guidance without it feeling controlling or undermining their interest. The quality of the relationship mattered hugely.
That makes sense. Any other examples?
Sure. Studies in Ghana found that when parents used autonomy supportive practices explaining reasons, offering choices within limits, their children were actually more likely to endorse and internalize collectivist cultural values.
So supporting autonomy helped them willingly embrace the group's values rather than rebelling against them.
Exactly. When cultural expectations are presented in a way that supports volition, people are more likely to identify with and integrate them. Autonomy supports cultural socialization when done well. It doesn't inherently conflict with it.
That's a really key point. Okay, finally, let's connect all this to goals and long-term happiness. SDT talks about different types of life goals, right? Goal content theory?
Yes, goal content theory, or GCT. It basically distinguishes between two types of long-term aspirations.
Which are?
Intrinsic aspirations, things like personal growth, developing meaningful relationships, contributing to the community, physical health, and extrinsic aspirations focusing on outcomes like wealth, fame, social recognition, or image and attractiveness.
And I imagine SDT has a strong perspective on which type leads to greater well-being.
It does, and the evidence is quite consistent. Pursuing and attaining intrinsic goals is much more strongly linked to happiness, vitality, and psychological health than pursuing and attaining extrinsic goals.
Why is that? Is it just that money can't buy happiness?
It's deeper than that structurally. Intrinsic goals, by their very nature, tend to directly satisfy the basic psychological needs for autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Growing as a person, building close bonds, helping others, these activities inherently feed those needs.
Okay, that makes sense. And extrinsic goals?
Extrinsic goals like chasing wealth or fame often don't directly satisfy those needs. Success is contingent on external validation, comparisons, and sometimes they even conflict with needs, like sacrificing relationships for work. They can also foster more controlled motivation, like interjection feeling pressured to maintain an image.
So the content of your goals matters because it determines whether pursuing them will actually nourish your fundamental psychological needs.
That's the core idea. Strive for goals that align with growth, connection, and contribution, and you're more likely to thrive.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive into self-determination theory. If we had to boil it down, the big message seems to be that genuine motivation, the kind that fuels well-being and high-quality performance, is about feeling autonomous, competent, and related. It's about integration.
Integration is a great word for it. Synthesizing your actions with your sense of self while feeling effective and connected. Autonomous motivation, whether it's purely intrinsic or well-internalized, identified, or integrated motivation, that's the fuel for deep engagement, persistence, creativity, and just overall psychological health.
And the big takeaway for you listening might be to reflect on your own motivation, but
Also to think about how these principles apply much more broadly. SDT provides a lens for looking critically at our social structures. Think about political systems, economic systems. How well do they support or thwart these basic needs?
so the fairness of an economy or the legitimacy of a government, these aren't just abstract concepts. They directly impact people's psychological wellness.
SDT suggests they absolutely do. When people feel they have a voice, that the system is fair, that they can be effective within it, meeting needs for autonomy, relatedness, competence, they're more likely to autonomously comply, to participate willingly. Control and inequality tend to breed alienation and controlled motivation, or amotivation.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound question to chew on. If we were to intentionally design our institutions, our schools, our workplaces, maybe even our political processes, with the primary goal of satisfying these three universal psychological needs for everyone, what would that society actually look like? How much healthier and more vital could we be?